Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Deltarune Theory. The wait is finally over! Yeah, this theory has kind of gotten a bit massive. I talked about it in a YouTube post, but it's like a rabbit hole that just keeps going and going. So, I finally got to the end, at least to what I can understand. And thankfully, in the meantime, someone has actually created a video that more or less explains everything I was going to talk about in part 2, other than some character analysis stuff, which I'll still have to do in a part 2 of this series. So instead of being 3 parts, there's now only 2 parts. And this is part 1. This video is entirely about Eram, or Eram, I don't know, however you want to pronounce it, which is also not its name, but we'll get there. The Shadow Mantle boss. And what it is, because everything that we thought about immediately doesn't really make any sense, in my opinion. So, let's just get into it. Part 1. What do we know on a base level about Eram? Well, the files call it nightmare_boss. At least the files relating to it are called nightmare_boss_something. And fans have taken to calling it Eram because that's the song that plays right before you fight it. Eram is, of course, mare backwards, so it being a nightmare boss. However you want to look at it, its name is basically Nightmare. So let's just sort of stick with that for the rest of this video. And speaking of Nightmare, it seems to be a reference to this specific boss in Link's Awakening, also called Nightmare. And this makes kind of total sense because the entire game segment of Chapter 3's S-Rank rooms, and just like the regular one too, but especially the S-Rank rooms, is based on Zelda. The files are all called Zelda something. And yeah, you start on a beach, very reminiscent of Link's Awakening, and you end up fighting a nightmare, also very reminiscent of Link's Awakening. So, it's kind of Link's Awakening. However, the game as we see it seems to be called Mantle. Now the title screen is like kind of blurred out, so we can't exactly read it, but it says Mantle, definitely. The screen shows up in like 2 slides and you'll be able to see it. However, it references a lot of a certain other game, which keep that in mind as well. We'll get there in 1 second. The boss drops the Shadow Mantle, which we basically need anyway, to defeat the Chapter 3 night fight. It talks very familiarly with Kris, so there's a pretty big implication that it's somehow related to Kris. And its actual battle theme, so not the song that plays when it shows up called Eram, but the actual song that plays when you fight it, is called Burning Eyes. All of these themes are in all caps because they're all related to the Weird Route, and Gaster somehow related to that, I guess. However, Burning Eyes has 2 leitmotifs. No freedom motif, for one, which is interesting. But it has percussion, which you can hear a very similar rendition of in the Knight's theme at the end of Chapter 3. However, both of these are probably based on the song from Undertale called Burn in Despair. This is a song that plays when you're fighting Asriel in the True Pacifist ending. I didn't buy this at first. I was like, no, they're just drum beats. Like, this can be pretty hard. But listening to them back to back, which I will allow you to do in a second, it's pretty clear that actually, yes, that is true. Okay, other than Burn in Despair, the other song that we sort of get referenced is Battle Against a True Hero. Which of course plays for Undyne in the Genocide Route, which, what does that even mean? Especially because Gerson never touches this theme. Gerson references Undyne's other themes, like nya, 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 or whatever, her like introduction theme, and her actual battle theme, but never actually, like Spear of Justice, Battle Against a True Hero, which, why is it here? These are questions we need to answer. Let's continue. So, here's the title screen, by the way. You can kind of see the shapes of Mantle on top of like a bar in the background. So yeah, the game seems to be called Mantle. However, it's definitely reminiscent of the game we've heard from Noelle and Susie called Dragon Blazers, sort of an in-universe Final Fantasy Zelda game. And perhaps what's going on is what we see in this little snippet I've pulled above the Mantle picture on the slides from one of Noelle's blog posts from the Spamton Sweepstakes, where she says that, like everything good, Catpedders the RPG is kind of a ripoff of Dragon Blazers. So maybe Mantle is also kind of just a ripoff of Dragon Blazers, which means it's, you know, as we learned from Gerson, Dragon Blazers is based on Lord of the Hammer, which is based on the Prophecy. So Mantle would be based on Dragon Blazers, which was based on, it's like 4 levels deep of fiction, but still related to the Prophecy. So no matter what this game is, it definitely relates to stuff that's happening in Deltarune, and therefore we can probably sort of presume that it is somehow related to the Prophecy. So, Game 1 itself, the first board that you can access after clearing Tenna's first board, takes place on a beach. We already talked about that. You find a sword, you kill everything, and then you go out of bounds by destroying trees and get the ice key in a very ominous tone plays. As far as I can tell, this is the only map that doesn't really seem to reference anything directly in Deltarune. Now, I could be wrong, but I don't remember anything from Chapter 1, which this could really only be Chapter 1, because, as you'll see, Board 2 is kind of based on Chapter 2, that relates to this specifically. Like the going out of bounds with a tree. I mean, you could say it's the Eggman, maybe, but even that's a little bit of a stretch, even though it does kind of align with what I'm going to talk about later. Anyway, for now, let's just move on to the juicier stuff, and we'll come back to this. So, Part 2, the second board. This is the one where you basically reenact the weird route. You sail upwards on the raft past Tenna's board. Essentially, you go into the Glacier section, use the ice key to enter a area very reminiscent of the basement from Chapter 2, and then you basically do the weird route there. You get Noelle, you hurt her so she uses ice magic, you kill Birdly, the Bluebird character, and then you move forward. Interestingly, Noelle talks about a room that we play in this section as being specifically from Dragon Blazers. And in fact, if you look at the bottom of this little gray snippet I took from the Spamton Sweepstakes, you can see that there's a song in Dragon Blazers called Glacier, misspelled in the exact same way as the song that is in now the Deltarune soundtrack. So is Mantle a separate game, or is it just Dragon Blazers? But it's got a different title. Because that's clearly not, it clearly doesn't say Dragon Blazers, but for all intents and purposes, let's just say it's Dragon Blazers from now on. There's too many sort of coincidences, even if it is a ripoff. So, Noelle talks about in this blog post, a cross-shaped maze in the ice area from Dragon Blazers. Once you go in it, no matter where you go, you'll always be brought back to the same room. Then she talks about how it's impossible unless you have a character to guide you, which sometimes you don't. Like, you can go there without them. But even if you don't have this character, there actually is a path. Somehow Kidme was so stubborn, she says, I think I went every single possible direction somehow, XD. Then the last direction you go is up. If you do that, you'll find a door that doesn't appear anywhere else in the game. Of course, this is referencing the exact same maze segment that we actually see in the Mantle game. Skipping forward a bit, we have Noelle saying she was so happy that she got back to the door she almost screamed. And then it was locked, and she couldn't find any key in the game to open it. And I mean, that kind of does make sense, right? The key that we find to open it is supposed to be the ice key. Although we use the ice key to enter the sort of glacier area at the beginning, what we actually use to open this door is the white cloak itself. So Noelle, you know, the she was used up line. It's clear, the game makes it clear that you're supposed to use the ice key here. But, like, we got the ice key out of bounds. So, how does that even make any sense? Of course, Noelle wouldn't be able to open it. She can't sacrifice herself to open the door. Anyway, we are able to. But it's safe to say that Mantle is, for all intents and purposes, supposed to be Dragon Blazers. So, after that, we get to board 3. And this is where things get, if I may, very, very interesting. Because board 3 takes us through events that we haven't seen in the story yet. And it's in a very obscured way, just like in chapter 2, where we don't, like, get a full scene of what happened to Birdley and, what was happening with Spamton and Queen at the time. But we do have these little mini boss encounters that sure do seem very familiar to things that are happening in actual Deltarune. So I'm going to go from top left to bottom right, and we're going to talk about each of these in terms of the pictures. So the top left picture shows a yellow monster. This yellow monster shoots red spears out of its mouth and is surrounded by golden flowers. Sure sounds a lot like Asgore, doesn't it? And we have pretty good authority that we're going to see Asgore in a dark world in the next chapter. Even if that isn't the main dark world, like some people are guessing, it's kind of too obvious almost, it seems. But we're definitely going to probably fight Asgore in the dark world, which means this sort of mini-boss area is a reference to that. The second picture we have is a grayscale fish enemy surrounded by yellow dinosaur enemies. This is where things start to get a little spooky. I mean, Undyne's been taken into the bunker, and you can very clearly sort of map Undyne to this fish enemy and the yellow lizards to Alphys, of course, right? These two have a similar relationship, as Asgore and Flowers do, I guess. If Undyne is in the bunker and they do the sacrifice and she turns grayscale, that makes her a goner. So that might be a hint to something that's going to happen in the future. The third image, this one, to be honest, I'm a little shaky on my ideas about this one. But okay, it's some sort of pink singing cat or fox or something surrounded by sleeping white versions of the same creature. And when you kill the pink singing one, the white sleeping ones wake up and attack you. There's only 2 characters I can think of that this pink singing cat can be. And maybe I'm wrong. This is another thing I would be interested to hear what you have to say about in the comments. But there's only really 2 characters I can think. One is Sham. Sham is, of course, a purple cat, but perhaps in their heyday, they were a lighter color and, got sort of darkened by wear and tear over time. The idea that Sham might be the one that sings the song from the sea isn't crazy. I mean, the song from the sea is so mysterious, and it's something we didn't really get any elaboration on in these chapters, so it being something that comes up with Sham later could be. The other character this could be, and it sort of lines up with the rest of these a bit better, because the rest of these are all lighteners, is Caddy. Hear me out on this one, all right? I'm talking about Caddy with an I. Caddy refuses to go to the church. Why? Her whole other family is there, and I know she finds them annoying, but she also likes Noelle. Noelle's in the choir. The idea that maybe she was in the choir at some point too isn't really that crazy. And when I think about cats, specifically maybe a white cat with some sort of pink element to them, I think about Caddy with an I. And maybe what this is sort of implying, because Caddy is the only white cat in the, well, now we know their last name, the Kattenheimer family. So perhaps she's dyeing her fur white, and originally she's closer to pink, and this is sort of a representation of, she used to be a lot more carefree, and then she was sort of drawn in this protective shell by some sort of event. And that's what these sort of white guardians are representative of. Like they cover up her innocence in order to protect herself. I don't know. This one's very hard to sort of read, but that would be my take on it. The idea that Caddy might show up in a dark world eventually is definitely not crazy, because she has a talk sprite and she's involved with Noelle, doesn't like Susie. If Susie takes Noelle to the festival, is there a chance that maybe she might follow her to try to take revenge or something? I don't know. She seems a little unhinged. It's possible. And then, definitely the most interesting of the 3 is the 4th example. This is the monster that follows your movements exactly. You have to sort of trick it into pressing a button, which allows you to take control of it, and then Kris will kill it as it gets close to you. You've probably, just naturally, your eyes have probably been drawn to the 2 deer sprites at the bottom of this screen. I put the blue outlines around them just to be clear, just, so they stood out against the background and you could actually see them. There is a normal looking deer and a blacked out deer. The normal looking deer is the original sprite for the white cloak, and then a variable is clicked and it becomes the actual white cloak sprite. The same thing is true for this blacked out deer. It is the original form of this mirroring monster in the bottom right corner of the screen. And then a variable is checked that changes the sprite into what you actually see in game, which is sort of like a dreamer looking. It's the same monster as Asgore, just with different colors, right? The variable, though, is called Toriel. I don't really know what to make of that, to be honest. What I can say, though, is this seems like an intentional foreshadowing of something we're already kind of thinking about when it comes to Des. The idea that Des is like cursed, that the night form that we fight of her, if it truly is her, isn't like really her. It's some sort of monstrous form of her, right? So something to do with Toriel, and then she turns into a monster. I don't know how that really works out. That's not really what this video is about, but the important thing to remember is that we've already seen Des and the Night in this sort of elaboration of future events in the third chapter area. So, we enter the shelter, and inside we fight Eram, or Nightmare. The shelter is dark and blue. This is sort of completely a tangent, but maybe that's connection to the whole water thing. We've gotten a lot of water symbolism with the dark fountains. Maybe it's related to this somehow. Probably not, but you never know. But yes, we fight the Nightmare boss. And before we do, they have a small conversation with Kris. And I'm going to read this out to you because it's very important. Kris. Oh, Kris. Is it fun, Kris? Playing around like this? That's why you're searching for them, aren't you? The shadow crystals, and the shadow mantle that I'm holding. Do you honestly think it will get you what you want? No. Part of you is just enjoying this, isn't it? There's a section here that is only viewable on the weird route. The same part of you that enjoyed yesterday, knowing you could say it wasn't really you. And now we're back to text you see on any route. Oh, don't make that sour face. I can see in the dark, you know. The question is, can you? And then the fight begins. And this tells us a few important pieces of information. One, Eram has some sort of relationship with Kris. They seem very familiar with Kris. Two, the shadow crystals they know about, even though they don't have one. And the shadow mantle that it's holding. Very important to keep in mind. It is holding the shadow mantle. When it comes to the enjoying it part, that will be important in like 2 slides. And image friend is here. For some reason. I mean, surely we'll be able to figure that out by the end of this, right? Maybe? So, let's talk about what Eram is and is not. 1. Eram is definitely representative of something in the real world. Because everything in this game is representative of something in the real world. Something from the prophecy, at least. I mean, when you go back to this screen, we see the representation of Asgore, the representation of Des, the representation of Undyne, probably, and maybe Caddy. But Eram is not like an independent being from this game. It is representative of something in the prophecy. And interestingly, we've already seen a lot of characters, especially from the light world. So we know it can't be any of them because we've already seen what they're represented as. So it can't be Susie or Ralsei, who we kill in order to get into the section in the third map. Can't be Kris, because, Kris is the character we're playing as. Noelle is represented by the white cloak, Birdly by that blue bird we freeze, Asgore by the yellow monster, Undyne by the great out fish, Alphys by the yellow lizards. Toriel is represented by some of the white monsters you'd kill in that one room that wasn't super interesting, but it is true. And Des is, of course, referenced by the Mirroring You monster. There's also no evidence that the Dark World denizens from Chapter 3 are controlling Eram. And I know this is a tempting thought because we all want Ram to be cooler than Ram is, because it's kind of a shame Ram is kind of, put to the wayside in Chapter 3 as a secret boss. But there's no evidence that any other character in the game is directly controlled in the same way they are in Tenna's game. After all, Ram makes it clear specifically that this is the original version of the game before Tenna messed with it. And, I mean, Dragon Blazers isn't... Not every enemy in Dragon Blazers is controlled by somebody on a different, like, console, right? That doesn't make any sense. So, Eram is an independent being, not controlled by, like, an NPC. And 3, we just, sort of made clear, Eram isn't the mantle itself come to life either, because it is holding the mantle. Now, I do think it looks like the mantle, just in terms of looking like a cape. I think it does kind of look like the cape. That was my original thought. But I think the thing we're kind of forgetting is we don't see Eram or a Nightmare boss at all after it deposits the cape in that chest. So maybe it was wearing the cape in our confrontation and then took the cape off, put it in the chest, and fled before we saw its true form. That seems more likely to me than anything else. But okay, that's basically everything we've talked about in terms of what Eram could be. It's not representative of a Lightner we know, and it's not representative of a Darkner from Chapter 3, and it's not representative of the item. What is it then? Well, I have a theory. We finally reached the theory section. The demon. Now, in order to challenge Eram, we have to go through this door you can see at the top of the slide here that is sort of framed, literally, by Kris's red horn headband. And it's interesting because it made me think of something I hadn't connected before, which was these lyrics of Raise Up Your Bat. So I'm just going to read you the lyrics now. When the demon heart is crying and the blood is gushing bright, raise up your bat for the burning fight. When your hope is slowly dying and your future's lost its rights, raise up your bat and face the fright. Let's knock 'em dead into the night. This isn't really the lyrics most people are analyzing because the Lost Girl sort of chorus part is much more inherently interesting. But I do think that these lyrics could actually tell us something about what Eram is. And when we really think about them for a second, things start to line up a lot. The demon heart, for one, I mean, we've only know of one specific heart. And if the red horn headband is somehow related to what's going on here, then the demon heart would, of course, be the red soul, probably. Blood is gushing bright doesn't really matter, but raise up your bat for the burning fight. What is Eram's particular attack element? It's fire, right? Even bombs, which are its only attack that isn't explicitly fire, are still fire-y. They make fire, basically, right? So raise up your bat for the burning fight does seem to really align with sort of Eram's fight. It's a burning fight, all right. When your hope is slowly dying and your future's lost its rights. That sounds a lot like being chained to the prophecy. Your future's lost its rights because you have no way to change it anymore. It's set in place. Then you raise up your bat and face the fright. If Eram is some sort of being in the shelter, it would make sense that they would be some sort of final fight related to the prophecy, because the shelter is probably going to be the final dark world we enter, or at least one of the finals. I mean, there's always the chance that, we're going to have the whole town become a dark fountain at some point, or it gets sort of metatextual at the end. But I think the actual end of the prophecy will probably be related to the shelter in some way. After all, we need 3 codes. We went to the church, which should have been one code, right? The Deltarune code. The next one seems to be at Asgore's flower shop, which would deal with the police code. And then we'd have to get the holiday code, But yes, perhaps this whole sort of refrain from Raise Up Your Bat is not only referring to Eram, but referring to a fight that will or has already happened. I'm not going to elaborate too much on that until we get to part 2, but just keep that in mind, I guess. Kris's power is notably courage. In the Chapter 1 fight specifically, this is the easiest example to talk about. After you talk to King, each party member gets a new ability. Ralsa gets Dual Heal, Susie gets Red Buster, and then Kris gets Courage. And that kind of tracks, right? If our final enemy is related to Kris's fear in the shelter, then the idea that courage is their power, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But what this doesn't really tell us is what the demon actually is. What is Kris afraid of? Like, we can say that it's Kris's fear, but that still means it could be anything. I mean, at that point, it could be the night, right? But that's not exactly the direction I'm going in. The Forgotten Man. So, in Chapter 3, which, keep in mind, this is a fountain that Kris created. So, as we know in Chapter 4, when Susie creates a fountain, it's based on her view of the world. This fountain is based on Kris's view of the world. Chapter 3's Egg Room, well, Eggland, let's say, because it's a whole man country, is a place reflective of Kris's actively being forgotten memories, I would say. And my reason for saying that is because the Shutta, who is the one that sort of gives you the hint to start this quest, says that there once used to be a different kind of land here, and then Tenna essentially came in and signed everybody to contracts, and the TV world was built on top of it. And that makes sense, because, like, symbolically, what I believe that to represent is the idea that Kris used to play in this living room with toys, right? The 7 flying aces were photocopied playing cards, or they would play an imagination game with the laptop and all of this stuff. But eventually, as they grew up, now we have the TV, and they're playing video games and watching cartoons, right? Instead of playing imagination games. So this is the land of imagination games, let's say. And the Forgotten Man is from this time period as well. And that's why this is the only egg room that the Forgotten Man can speak in, because it is related to this specific time period in Kris's life when they were quite young. And this is a fountain that Kris created. So the sort of, let's say, shadow on the backside of your mind is much stronger in this fountain for Kris than in any other one. So, what is the Forgotten Man really about? Well, we have this page on the Spamton sweepstakes called Therapy. And on this page, you essentially draw in the center of the screen for long enough, then the Eggman tree pops up, and then it takes you to the egg page, which talks about a strange egg found in Cap Headers by Noel. If we sort of transpose that onto what we see in Chapter 4, Chapter 4's Egg Room specifically, we see like a doctor's office, but perhaps it is instead a therapist's office, right? We go into this room that we aren't allowed to see, only Kris can see. We, draw on an easel like a bunch of times, wildly draw lines, and then eventually when the drawing is done, a tree is painted over top of everything. After this, if you go to wash your hands in the sink, you get these 2 lines, which I think are very representative of what the Forgotten Man is. Between your fingers, a faint gray crease glittered stubbornly. You can never wash it all away. So, this Forgotten Man isn't just forgotten like the 7 flying aces because Kris moved on. He is intentionally being suppressed, right? This is probably related to Kris's trauma in the shelter that they maybe went to therapy to try to get through. And if that is true, that connects to what we were just talking about with this demon in the shelter, right? So perhaps the Forgotten Man is another representation of this entity. It's something that Kris saw that they're actively trying to forget. Okay, but we still haven't answered a lot of questions about Eram. For example, why does Eram seem to be so familiar with Kris? It could be the red horn headband, and that's why. But I think there's slightly more to it than that. There is a page, again, on the Spamton sweepstakes. And the reason I bring up the Spamton sweepstakes with such authority, I know that Toby said it's not strictly canon, but almost everything in the sweepstakes was referenced in these 2 chapters. That wasn't specifically mentioned to be Chapter 5 stuff. Even stuff that I never thought would be mentioned, like, for example, Glacier, right? I never thought that Dragon Blazer's song specifically would be an actual song in the OST of Deltarune. So I do think these things have some weight, and this one is almost impossible to ignore because it's a big flashing banner ad on the sweepstakes page with Icy's face all over it. Of course you're going to click it. So here's how it reads. This sighting comes again courtesy of Noelle Holiday. The other night, I went down to eat leftover pizza, but when I went down, it was dark, and I couldn't find the switch, and I saw Ice-E on the box, and he winked at me. I screamed. Only my sister believes me. An update to the sighting. Story update! My sister burned the box in the grass to kill it, and it smelled like charcoal pizza. She burned out Icy eyes, and he looked evil, and as he said, took it and said we should bury the box, and Kris dug a hole in the ground in the graveyard, and I was so scared a zombie would come up, and I tried to say, Kris, I'm scared, and they turned around with the box over their face, and I screamed, so Des hit at them, and took it away, and threw it away, and I think it's going to come and kill me. Remember what Eram's battle track was called? Oh yeah, Burning Eyes. Now, it may just be in reference to Kris's eyes, but even if that is true, this specific case, Kris wore the box over their face, and if Des had already burned out the eyes, then perhaps they were looking through those burned out eye holes. Burning eyes. It all connects together. So what if the Shadow Mantle isn't strictly just an item? What if the Shadow Mantle is the second meaning of a mantle as well, which is a title being passed down? After we beat the knight knights Kris, which is a ceremonial way of passing down a title. Kris is sort of an avatar of fear already. Like, they're known for being always scaring Noelle, doing all these pranks that are scary, right? Doing scary things. So, based on that behavior, it would make sense why Eram would talk to them in such a knowing way, right? Like, we're not so different, you and I, basically. By saying like, oh, isn't it fun? I know you like this. The knife grows dull without play. Because they're both sort of entities known for scaring people. Eram is specifically scaring Kris, whereas Kris scares other people. So they have this sort of, not camaraderie, maybe from Eram's perspective, they have this sort of camaraderie of both being things that scare people. And if it is the Red Horn headband, then that makes perfect sense, because that is from the time period where they were scaring Noelle all the time. That's from this time period that is described in the Icy Real Cryptid Recent Sightings Spanta Sweepstakes page. So it might be like a shadow of Kris almost, in a way, of Kris's younger self, or at least it's taken on some of those traits after the Red Horn headband fell in the shelter or something. But I think a good question to ask, and it's not a question I see asked very often, is why does Kris like to scare Noelle so much? Because it doesn't really seem to sort of fit with everything else that's going on with Kris that we know. I mean, in the Weird Route especially, Kris is all about trying to protect Noelle. They clearly care about her, even if she doesn't exactly understand what their relationship is. There's like multiple times when Noelle is asked like, oh, is Kris your friend? Susie implies is like, are you guys romantically involved? And every time she doesn't really know what to say. Like, oh, well, we were neighbors. And I think a reason for that is because Kris does care about Noelle, obviously, but there is an element to them that they don't show to us that it really informs a lot of the way they interact with her. And that element is intense fear. We know, when we think of like a character who is afraid in Deltarune, the first thing that comes to your mind is Noelle, obviously, right? And that is very true. Noelle, especially as a child, we see in all these examples of like the icy box, is very afraid of things. She's afraid the plug is going to kill her. She's afraid the game is going to kill her. But with the therapy page and everything else we learn about Kris, it is clear that Kris is also very afraid. And I mean, this trauma in the shelter specifically seems to be like their final mountain to conquer on this journey. Like they have to well up enough courage and power to overcome this crippling fear. Even going into a representation of the shelter, they try to fight us desperately. They are so afraid of what is inside of there. And I think that really informs why they act the way they do with Noelle in the things that Noelle tells us, right? Why they're always trying to scare her. It's the only way they have to sort of regain some level of control. And I don't mean control from us, because before us, they still had these issues, right? Of not really being able to feel right, let's say. They were the only human in the town, ostracized. Their family is very, I don't want to say like conformist. That's not really what I'm going for, but what do they have to, complain about? The Dreamers are awesome, right? And if Kris is this person who's sort of dour about their prospects in life and everything that's going on and has this like crippling fear, then a way they can regain control is by being kind of a bully. Specifically by scaring Noelle, they are proving to themselves that they are stronger than they think. That like there is someone out there who is afraid of them. They might be afraid of so many things, but even they are scary to someone. And I think that's very interesting when we think about what Eram is talking about. How Kris is enjoying some part of the weird route, enjoying some part of being controlled by us as the player even. Because we are able to give them this intense power that they don't have otherwise. The ability to like change things in their life. And I think that's very important to remember. So when it comes to Kris taking on this shadow mantle or being sort of the knight's squire, I think the best way to think about why and how it sort of intertwines with this knight is fear theory is the idea that being scary is the way that Kris reasserts control. It's just the way that they know to do that. And whether that's being scary to Noelle, being scary to us. I mean, the very first thing they do when they get our soul out in chapter 1 is to try to scare us into thinking they're going to kill somebody, right, with the knife. It's their way of trying to regain control. So the idea that they would go along with this like shadow crystals quests that'll probably lead to bad outcomes for the people they care about, I think the best way to view that is them giving up maybe their better interests for the chance to have some sort of feeling of power and control in their life. Whereas in the good route or the neutral route or whatever else is going on other than the weird route, we are unintentionally, but we are giving them higher levels of courage. Like they're showing they can defeat us in some cases. We might be like this powerful prophecy figure, but they are outsmarting us sometimes. And they can defeat a titan wielding our power and with the power that their friends give them, So that is something I do think is very important to think about when you think about Kris as sort of the squire of fear, I guess you can say, is that this is a role that they've always kind of had already. We're just sort of cementing it into this dark world form in the same way, Susie becomes a dark knight, right? And I think that could also explain, interestingly, why Kris not only likes Susie so much, but why Kris was completely unfazed by Susie's bullying at the beginning of the game. Because Kris knows exactly what's going on with Susie, which is, kind of interesting. They're very similar characters. If you look on the right of the screen, I have a picture called Nightmare. This is one of the fun events from Undertale. It's Icy's face on a snowman, and it's like distorted and creepy looking. Now, it's kind of a bit of a wash because Eram is a pixel, it's like, 8-bit sprite kind of. But if you compare Eram's mouth to the mouth on Nightmare, boy, do they look similar or what? And I know, it's like, okay, Eram's just supposed to have fangs. It's probably not a reference to this specifically. But remember, it is called in the files Nightmare Boss. And what does it mean that this exists and kind of looks like Eram? I mean, it ties into the icy story from the sweepstakes, which Noelle is related to. And it's a fun event in Undertale, and all the fun events seem to be in some way tangentially related to Gaster, who's like a big deal in Deltarune. And if you really wanted to get crazy, I mean, we have the Knights percussion section being referenced in Eram's theme, and Eram backwards is mare, so maybe it's some sort of obscure way of proving they're connected. Knight plus mare, nightmare, right?
I got boxes full of...
Okay, Charlie, I'm gonna have to stop you right there.
Fine. You know what, Barney? Give this guy a cigarette. He's freaking out.
Huh? Who?
Barney. He's the guy who tipped me off to Pepe Sylvia.
Barney? Who the hell is Barney?
You don't see... Oh, shit.
Anyways, question 2. Why friend? Why can Eram summon friend? I mean, if Eram is representative of Kris's trauma with the shelter in some way, I guess it makes some sense, because friend surely does seem to be representative of Noelle's fears, doesn't it? I mean, it's referenced in the Cat Petter's egg dialogue on the Spamton sweepstakes, and it sort of represents the sort of glitches and computer weirdness that scared Noelle when she was younger. We get so many pages on the Spamton sweepstakes about that stuff. Also, the first place where we see friend is that basement where the plugs stare at you with, in the same way Noelle describes in that one area. The other place we see friend is the Cat Petter's mini games that we can play, like Jongler and Pluie. I'm actually not sure exactly which ones it's in, because I haven't played those mini games, but it's in there. I know that for sure. I think it might be Jongler that it's in. It's the one where you race down a long hallway. It also appears in Ralsei's description of the Dark World in Susie's room, which is odd. As a chair, this is the sprite that is at the top of this slide that looks like the amalgamation from Undertale. That's definitely weird. And then it appears in this representation of Kris's trauma from the shelter. So all in all, it sure does seem like friend is in some way representative of like the fear of the dark. Which is weird, because that's exactly what Ralsei describes the Titans as being, right? Ralsei describes them as being the fear of the dark, the bump in the night, the shadow of the backside of your mind. And I brought this line up earlier when I was talking about the demon, I think. But the shadow of the backside of your mind is such an interesting phrase. Like, it tells you so much in such a short amount of words. It's very well done. Because the shadow of the backside of your mind isn't your conscious fears, right? It's not the things like you see and you go, ah, like a snake or a spider necessarily. It's like your unconscious fears. It's things that you try to pretend you're not afraid of, or things that you are subconsciously afraid of, which could be kind of what friend is, right? And yes, it does kind of look like the middle Titan when you really kind of squint a little bit, right? 2 horns on the side of its head with a bunch of eyes all over it. And hey, the Titan has the same amalgamate's empty hole face that friend appears as at the beginning of chapter 3. I wonder if that's meant to connect them together somehow. And, if that is all true, and these things are all sort of related, then it would make sense for Eram to be able to summon it in that battle, because it is like a fear entity. It also makes sense why it can appear all over the place, because it's following the things that we are afraid of. But yes, I don't know if you've picked up on it quite yet. The connections between these supposedly 3 separate entities are very, very strong. The demon is representative of something in the shelter that Kris is probably afraid of. The Forgotten Man is representative of some trauma that Kris has that they are probably afraid of. And then Friend is related to fear in general, things that people are afraid of. So, is it possible that all three of these things are actually the same thing, just different reflections of it through different people's sort of view of the world? I don't know. I don't think it's too big of a stretch. It changes its shape to scare people because different people are afraid of different things, right? So it is able to be simultaneously this disgusting amalgamate creature, or a hulking beast, or maybe not an icy pizza box, but a mysterious man behind the tree, or a burning demon thing, depending on, what scares you. So to summarize what the theory essentially is, it is that the demon, Friend, and the Forgotten Man are all representative of the same entity, something that is within the shelter that Eram represents, that is related to Kris's trauma and is some sort of fear entity. It also relates to the Titans through the same way. And the fact that we've already seen the Knight, which looks like the Titans that flank this big sort of monstrous one, sort of reflected in the Knight's design, makes me think that the final fight might be against something that is referencing more closely this hulking Titan's design. I mean, it's even got horns on the side of its head, right? Which the one that we fought doesn't have. It all seems to connect together very strongly. Okay, why is this the Night is Fear Part 1? Am I saying this thing is the Night? No. And in order to find out why we needed all of this setup, you're going to have to watch The Night is Fear Part 2. There's a reason I separated these two things, and it's because this theory is mostly just about Eram and Friend. But it is important because obviously this thing is inside the shelter in some capacity. And the Night, too, exists in the shelter in some capacity. So yeah, that's the end of the theory. I hope you're excited to see part 2. If you live in the future from when this video was posted, which, by the way, if you're going to leave a comment, please at least look at when the video was posted. This is something you should do for all videos. I say that not to be mean, but after Friend Inside of Me blew up as a theory, my chapter 3 secret boss theory that was made like a year before that was even uttered and didn't include Friend Inside of Me got a bunch of comments saying, you forgot about Friend Inside of Me. It's like, no, the video, it didn't exist when the video So if you want to leave a comment, please be conscious of how long ago this video was made. And yes, if you want to watch part 2, you can click the screen right now if you live in the future. If not, it'll be out soon, I promise. Thank you for watching. I do respond to as many comments as I can, so I'm interested to know what you guys think. See you next time.